As Amuro and Char prepare for the final confrontation, the last episodes of Mobile Suit Gundam become extraordinarily violent and grandiose. I was took aback at how violent these last parts are. There is so much death and destruction that felt almost overwhelming for me as a viewer. Still, as the viewers grew to know the main cast, this is what makes the ending even more beautiful. In the beginning of these episodes, the viewers come to know more about the cast. Mariah gets involved in a love triangle between a man she was arranged to marry and Slegger, the ladies' man. She ends up parting ways with the man she was engaged to out of her frustration that he doesn't understand her. Of all people, Slegger ends up being her lover. Bright plays a role here, and I really appreciate how Bright's character grew as this very compassionate and supportive person. He showed full support when Sayla and Mariah needed it. Due to the war, Slegger died in combat, however. Amuro accidentally bumps into his father later. Unfortunately, his father had become delusional and out of his mind out of a lack of oxygen from a previous accident he was in. He tried to give Amuro a part that was supposed to make the Gundam better. Amuro realized that this is junk and that his father has lost himself in his studies out of his obsession with war and the Gundam. It pained him and made him cry that his father is no longer the person he used to be, to the extent he doesn't even care about Amuro's mother anymore. To his father, Amuro isn't a son, but just a soldier now, and all he wants is for him to be glorious in battle and to show off the Gundam. It's really tragic that Amuro has to go through this with his delusional and selfish father, and he left broken from his dad's home with the realization of all this. Throughout the series, Char and Sayla constantly bumped into each other. Despite that the two have different goals and are technically enemies on opposite sides, whenever they run into each other, it's a bit adorable that Char would just hang out with her and talk about the old times. All he wants is for Sayla to live a happy life outside of the war, and went as far as sending her money for a trip away from the White Base and the madness. For Sayla, she is a soldier, and she cannot leave her obligation towards the White Base. What she wants is for Char to stop fighting alongside the Zeon. Char cannot accept that, because he's on a mission to get revenge on the Zabi family, and later on a whole different mission towards the end. All Sayla can do is follow him and cry, because nothing she does can convince her dear brother to stop fighting in the war. Lala is then introduced, alongside with a concept that seemed to confuse and put off a few viewers. Humanity has continued to exist for a very long time now during these times of war, and now evolution, it seems, has brought about the new man, the new type. These are individuals that develop psychic-like powers that aid them during battle. At first, I found this a bit wacky and out of place. Luckily, the execution and use of the new types appealed to me and made it fine in the end. It added this surreal and supernatural type of execution in the battles that is amusingly bizarre, and so it reminds me of End of Evangelion. Lala is Char's lover and a super soldier because of his abilities. With no real experience, she begins taking down the Federation forces en masse. She ends up befriending Amuro, and the three will get involved in a very emotional battle later on in the future. This all leads to a huge showdown between Char, Amuro, Lala, and Sayla. Char at this point begins to awaken his own new type powers. At this time though, he is still too weak, as Amuro has mastered them to a greater extent. It's breathtaking and intense the type of strategies Amuro uses as he fights. As his new type power increases, he is able to see the future to aid him in battle. Char does lose, but before Amuro can deal with a final blow, Lala pushes Char out of the way and takes it, dying in the process. Sayla had been flying by and almost got taken out by Char, who seemed to not know it was her, just before Layla had stopped him from swinging his weapon previously. Even though Lala is dead, she seems to be able to communicate with Amuro from the afterlife. The final confrontation began as one of the Zabin sons betrayed the father. They used a huge weapon that fired a great light that took out the Emperor as well as a large number of Federation forces. Thus, the peace talks were finished and the final battle began. This happened because of Giren Zabi, a man so shameless he killed his own father to take power and further his own agenda. Even more tragic is that Cassilia, the daughter of Degwin, figured the selfish and ruthless plan of her own brother Giren and shot him in the back of the head in front of the crew for what he did. She decided to hide his assassination by having the staff say he died honorably in battle and takes power as the last Zabi left that can rule at that time. And yet, even she shamelessly tries to lie to her own crew so that she may escape for her own safety. Maybe this is because this would save the Zabi family bloodline, and yet it doesn't seem worth saving at all. Char would play a role in this towards the end, in its final move. The brutality of the last 2 episodes is beyond what much anime has tried to do. Everyone gets involved in the last battle, even the children who can't even hold the gun right. The White Base finally gets shot down and ultimately destroyed, leaving the crew having to try and fight and survive on foot. The gun tank, the gun canyon, everything is destroyed. In the final showdown, Char and Amuro go all out in the final battle that is almost on the same level as Joy versus Jose Mendoza. Char is put on an experimental robot that requires a new type to work efficiently. Char is unable to use his potential out of his own incompetence. The once smug and confident Char is now tense and alarmed. He felt now his life really is in danger. He had already lost composure when Lala died, and it's a bit nerve-wracking to see him so anxious now. Amuro, as hilariously as before, is putting his life on the line by using every ounce of strength he has to scream out Char's name, and with murderous intent while persistently chasing him like a cheetah. And Char doesn't disappoint. He manages to damage the Gundam by blowing up one of its arms and its head. That doesn't stop Amuro from destroying Char's own robot, but he happens to escape with just the head, as Amuro had thought he was in the body of the robot when he struck with his weapon. Amuro chases him into the base and uses the Gundam as a decoy while he floated around outside with his projectile weapon. This is when Sayla would go out using her own new type powers to look for her brother. At that point, Char and Amuro are fencing in a room while still trying to desperately kill each other. As everything blows up around them, Amuro takes a stab in his shoulder while Char gets stabbed in the face, kept alive only because of the cracked helmet he was wearing. Because Sayla interfered, the two could not finish, but Char reveals as Sayla tries to get him to stop that the new types are too dangerous and that he has a new vision involving stopping them. Still, he learns of Casilia's plan and goes to kill her, as his revenge is still part of the agenda. In one of the most brutal deaths in the series, he finds her in her escape ship and shoots her with a rocket launcher. It hits her and tears off her head before exploding and killing the crew. This will be the last time Char is shown, as his status is now MIA. In the end, Amuro uses his new type abilities to tell the crew on the White Base to retreat. He would save all their lives, for if he didn't, they all would have died when the White Base blew up. Amuro manages to find his damaged Gundam and uses part of it to get back home regardless. When Amuro gets back, I felt this overwhelming feeling of joy that the crew all made it alive. Amuro realized he does have a home to come to. He does have loved ones that he loves. A peace treaty was called, and though Mobile Suit Gundam is a brutal and harsh series, there is a glimmer of hope and relief in the end. Regardless, peace is always and only temporary. Thank you for listening.